Hello, everyone. My name is Natalia Wilson, and I welcome you all to Kiwi Tech's 808 workshop for startups and entrepreneurs to help them navigate the challenges of starting a business, making it sustainable, and taking it to the next level. Today, we have a mentor session on branding for startups by Kurt Doughty, founder of kurtdoughty.co. With that, I'd like to invite Kurt to introduce himself and begin with his session on branding for startups. Over to you, Kurt.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Happy to be here. So just a small introduction to myself. I have been in the branding world for over 30 years, primarily in entertainment, films and movies, and television. And in the marketing side, I've been doing marketing for probably 20 years. And then most recently, over the last 10 to 12 years, I've been in product development and building out mobile apps. And over the last 6 years, I've been primarily working with startups. And in that process of working with startups, I certainly have learned a lot of lessons. And some of those lessons I want to evangelize and share with you, because what I have found is that there are many founders who haven't considered branding when they are developing their product, which might be an app or a service or anything like that. And so I started a startup accelerator program focused on branding for startups so that I could start to have that conversation when founders initially talk to me, and help them realize the importance of it. And so throughout this presentation today, I'm going to go through what is my process of branding in a very streamlined way, but it will also hopefully educate you on that branding means more than a logo. So that said, I'm going to share my presentation and we'll get into it. You can see the categories that my consultancy is focusing on is branding, marketing, product design. And so this is a very important slide. And when I talk about having my own practice or my own view or process as it relates to branding, we call it a brand first methodology. And that means understanding, developing a brand strategy that ends with a creative expression. And though our process is holistic, it unifies a number of areas or aspects of stories that I've helped global companies figure out their brand. And so it starts by developing the corporate identity from the core values and developing it outwards through all of its potential expressions. And there's many touch points these days for a brand. It goes beyond a website or a TV spot or a magazine ad. It's a lot more. But this little chart on the right that we're building here, it supports this notion of why we start with the brand first, because brand is really the vision of your company. Brand helps you organize your company. Brand helps you define your product, so brand as product. Customer service is a reflection of your brand. So these are all things intersecting with brand. Brand is identity. What is your logo? What are your colors? What is the look and feel of your brand? And then brand is personality. You can add a lot of personality once you get into some of the more dynamic expressions of a brand, such as in television, animation, video. Then brand is communication. It's important to speak about what the brand is with words, and we're going to get into that. And then lastly, brand is user experience. Many startups are creating a service that lives on a website and or a mobile app, and that user experience is very much part of the success of a brand, the downfall of a brand, And is that customer experience, that customer experience. So brand as user experience is a very important point. Now, in developing a brand and considering all these aspects of now what a brand is, it has to go through these filters. Is it ownable? Is it supportable? Is it defendable? Is it extendable? Is it scalable? So if it's ownable, this gets into trademark issues. Are you using a mark that you bought in stock imagery or Shutterstock or something? Can you actually use that as your corporate logo? And can anybody else use it? Very important question. Is the brand that you're creating, is it supportable? Meaning, can you back up what you're saying? And also be able to defend any of these statements that you're making with your vision, mission, and position. Is the brand extendable? Well, what does that mean? Well, product development. Okay, you may launch with one thing, but then may evolve it to another product set. And so ideally, you want to have a brand that is extendable, so it's recognized as a subproduct of the mothership brand. And then it all feels cohesive and part of the same family. And is it scalable? Is your brand with an array of products that might be rolled out over time? Can you scale your operation to support this new product development and the new brands that you're launching? So these are all important things to consider. Now, having said that, I think it's time for our first poll, because I want to ask is if there's any founders here, who designed your logo? When we say branding is more than a logo, it's all these other things. So who's designing your logo? So it'd be great to find out in this live poll what some of those answers are, or where it's weighted. I always find this interesting. And so we're going to get to 30, and then we're going to talk about the results here. And I've listed here these options, and there's obviously more options than this: agency, graphic designer, family member, student, or other. But generally, it's expensive to go out to an agency. And when you're in startup mode, you're in bootstrap mode, you don't necessarily have money or have budgeted for branding. And so then you look for cheaper solutions, and that may be contracting with just a single graphic designer. And that's looking like that's leading the pack. Some of you may have creative kids or nephews or nieces in your family that are in art school or just have aspirations to be creative. And so many times, hey, can you design a logo? And that's when the family member enters the fray. Many times founders have access to students. They're teaching classes and they recognize talent in their classes. And many people don't know, but that's how the Nike logo was done. One of the founders was a teacher at the local college and asked one of his students to design the Nike logo, and look where we are. I'm not sure how much she made from that. It was a female student. But it looks like maybe we're not going to get to 30 people, 70% participated, but it looks like the overwhelming average is 57% used a graphic designer. So I applaud those efforts because that is a great path. Second looks like, well, other, and I don't know what that, what are those some of those considerations. And then family member, then agency. So primarily graphic designer. So I'm going to say that's good. But what I'm going to get into now is another aspect of the brand, and it's the writing. So a graphic designer doesn't necessarily have a practice in the communication skills that are required to develop a vision, mission, and position. that may come from, a strategist or a brand writer or a creative director, inside or outside of an ad agency or branding agency. But that's what we're going to get into. So let's close the poll. Do I close the poll? Maybe I can close the poll here. Okay. So what we want to do when we start a branding exercise with me, my consultancy, we want to get to the truth. And so we have a process called the core truth. And so what it is, it's a collaborative effort, usually done with surveys with key team members, the core team, the C-suite, if you have one as a founder. It could be constituents, whether it's salespeople or actual clients or customers. But we want to, I'm coming into this not knowing much about your business. And so I need to learn about the business. So the way we get to the core truth is talking to people. And we do it in a way that is private and confidential. And we share the aggregate information that we glean from these interviews. And those interviews can be in the form of a SWOT analysis. But what we're trying to get to is, what's true about your audience? What's true about the culture and context of your company, your business, your startup? And what's truly differentiating about the brand, about this service? What is your USP, your unique selling proposition? What's the truth about the category that you're in? What are the dynamics there that have led you to believe that you have an answer to this certain problem within a certain category, a certain business vertical? And then connection. What does it mean to be connected to your audience? How are you connecting? What is that type of connection? Is there an emotional connection? Branding certainly plays up those things when it comes to communication and tugging at the heartstrings of someone to buy your product because there's a reason that you're doing this. So we get this aggregate information, and then we come up with a core truth that starts to define the category and become the basis for the brand building. And what that leads to is those 5 categories. And this is an example. This is Jatai. It was a pivot that I did with a brand. It was a 70-year-old company, manufacturer and distributor, and they needed to pivot to decrease declining sales. So we needed to know all these things about what are the truths about their business. And so these became actionable insights based on those truths that become an action plan of what they're supposed to do to turn around the company. And so all this collection of data, all these interviews, it's all words, people talking, there's curation, there's some insights developed from, I heard this in an interview and it seems to be corroborated by this other founder, and I think we need to go in this direction. So it's all about words, and that's the communication platform. And so what we want to work towards is developing the core values of a brand. What are the core values? Well, generally they are they're referred to as brand pillars. They become these verbs and words that describe feelings about the company. Are you honest? Are you trustworthy? Are you leading in technology? All these different qualities vary depending on the different type of service that you're creating. So what you need to come up with is, maybe it's 6, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 3. There's no specific set of numbers, but it shouldn't be 10 because then you start to get some repetition. So there's a process in which we, prioritize words and then come up with supporting statements. Like, let's just say in the polling and the interviews, we came up with 20 great words that describe the company. Well, how do you get that down to 6 core values? Well, the way you do that is some of those words that made up the 20, they may be great words to integrate into a supporting statement of the rationale of why you have a certain core value. So there's a way to get all those insights and all those great words into what will be a communication platform, because at the end of the day, anything that you write about or say about the company needs to include the core values as words, as key words. So not only would they be used in search, but they help support and help people understand that how you're talking about the brand, the service, or the app incorporates the core values of the company. And then there's no disconnect when something goes wrong, and sometimes things go wrong and brands don't live up to their core values, and usually that's a communication problem handled maybe by a chief communications officer if you have one, but startups usually don't. So as an example, this is the Jatai set of core values that we came up with based on those discussions. So they're a modern company. They are reliable. They're a leader in their industry because they do international distribution. They're a world-class organization. They have a 70-year heritage, and they have high integrity. They're highly trustworthy. So you can see a lot of these key words from the core values are also in the supporting statements. And this becomes a communication platform, which becomes the boilerplate of how people speak about the brand. You develop the words. We give people the words so they don't have to hem and haw and scratch their head and trying to describe what it is that they do. Everyone in the organization needs to know their core values, the communication platform, and then most importantly, the VMP, which is the vision, mission, and position. So we're going to take a pause and actually go to the next poll, if we could bring that up. And that question is, what is the length of your elevator speech? Now, people talk about the elevator speech as something that you get in an elevator, someone says, hey, what do you do? And between floor 1 and floor 5 or 13 or whatever, you need to explain to this person, the stranger in the elevator, what it is that you do. And so that may be short, it may be long, but it's an elevator ride. So I have asked in this poll, is it 10 seconds, 30 seconds? Is it 3 minutes? Or do you even have an elevator speech? And so looking at 19 of 35 participants here, it looks like 30 seconds is a leader in terms of some founders feel that they can get it down to 30 seconds, which is great. It's even greater if you can get it down to 10, and that's coming in second. So that's good. 3 minutes is probably not an elevator speech. It's a little long-winded. I think you're going to have to exit the same floor as the person you're talking to and explain walking down the hall exactly what you do if you're taking 3 minutes. But predominantly, it looks like 30 seconds is the winner. So that may be all we get with our 54%. So let's close that poll and let's talk about the VMP. I guess I can close the poll. I did that before. Okay. So what is the vision statement? We've done all this research. We have core values now. We have a communications platform. And the vision statement is something that is so basic, and it needs to be basic. It needs to be so simply stated that it is one sentence. It's what the world will look like after you've finished changing it. So as an example, fill in the blank here. To be the North American leader of artificial intelligence globally. You know, you can fill in the blank here, but all of a sudden it starts to feel like, yeah, okay, that's something people can get behind. And, you know, then you have to start to own it and be able to defend it, like I talked about before. So that's the vision statement. And it often gets confused with what is the next element of the VMP, the mission statement. And that is what's wrong with the world and how you intend to fix it. Okay, it becomes more tactical. Vision is like, the rays of God are exclaiming the vision for the company. And then the mission is the nuts and bolts of what it is you're going to do and how to get there. And how you're going to get there becomes tactical for the people that work for who created the vision. It's like, what do I do every day at work? It's like, your mission is to do this. So this new company specializes in what you do in this category, and we provide these types of services executed in this way, and that's how we will execute or deliver these services. So it's a little more compound. It's literally probably 3 sentences, but it's not one. And it starts to get into tactics, okay? Because it's a tactical thing. And that's the mission statement. Now going to the next, it's the positioning statement. And it adds another layer of complexity, because it is exactly who you are serving, meaning you've defined your audience, your demo, your psychographic, your personas, and what you are serving up and how you serve it. Okay, so here's a fill in the blank exercise. So to this audience, to baby boomers, our new company is the leading manufacturer of eyeglasses. I wear them. I'm a baby boomer. In the category of smart glasses. And our unique selling proposition is this: we can do e-commerce through glasses, let's say. I'm just making this up on the fly. And we deliver online. And so we're an online service. So that's a lot to pack into basically 2 sentences. But there's a difference between the vision, mission, and position. You need to have all 3. What happens often is in the collaborative process that I use, they start morphing into just one statement when they need to be 3 distinct statements. And so these types of exercises start to show and highlight the differences between them. And there's very specific reasons why they need to be different. So, who are you working with? Let's just say I'm doing this exercise with a founder, but whom might have that founder or CEO brought in to be the approver of what we're doing here? Because in this process, I might have talked with salespeople, other constituents like potential customers, friends and family even. But who is ultimately responsible to be the steward of the brand? And so that's my next poll. If we could bring that up. And the question is, do you have a CMO? Because a chief marketing officer is usually in charge of this. Very rarely do you find a chief branding officer. This was a hard lesson for me to learn. Once I had worked for a large branding agency and left that agency, I thought, hey, I'm a brander and I can do branding. And then I found there was no one to talk to about branding because no one had a budget for branding. So here's the poll here. Do you have a CMO? And it looks like no is leading here. And I suspect that we have a lot of founders on the call. So they're in various stages of their startup and or business, early stages. And so it becomes a problem. And so it's a situation where I can do this whole process and work with founders, which might be a CTO, a CEO, and maybe a COO, operations. Operations starts to become the default because they need to make sure the whole operation is working. That might include marketing in these early stages. But what we'll develop is a complete style guide so that it can be handed off and implemented by a new CMO once you get one. Because branding leads into marketing. The CMO is responsible for marketing, but they need to know, what does the brand stand for? So I will work with the leaders of the organization, with whatever leadership they have at the time when I'm engaged with them, and we'll make it work. Okay, so let's take down this poll, but it looks like most founders do not have a CMO. So I'd say that's an important hire in the next year or so. So let's go to the next slide. There we go. Okay, so once you have this vision, mission, and position, and your communication, your core values, you can then develop what we call the narrative. Okay, what is the narrative around the company? It can be any of those supporting statements. You will have identified various targeted groups. Again, this is an example with Jatai. They were working with hairstylists and barber schools and beauty schools, and both men and women, and you each had to speak to those different constituents in different ways. Okay, so that means if you're a hairstylist, you care about the quality of your products, and you're going to speak to them differently than you are a consumer, a female consumer who isn't necessarily going to buy the high-end equipment, but wants something, affordable. So that story, that narrative that's told, could be done with the influencer community, is certainly a big trend. Or it could be done with your own social amplification through your own social channels. So, all these things it's a cumulative effort in order to get the story out there, which begins the seeding of marketing. And sorry. Who wanted to speak there?
No, I think that was a glitch. Someone's mic just went. Sorry for that.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so I just wanted to share with you the brand that was developed. You've seen the words and the positioning, but this was actually the evolution of the brand, which delivers on those core values. So very modern, very relevant, and you can see these people, so people can relate to these images. Now, even though I did the complete brand, I did, hey, this is what your a trade show booth could look like. They could not afford that, so it brings up this other aspect about budgeting for branding. So let's bring up the next poll, which asks the question, have you budgeted for branding? Let's see what happens here. So it looks like the no's are winning. It's kind of a close race. And then, of course, there's yes and no. And then the other answer is we have a logo. Okay, great. You have a logo. There's other aspects besides the logo that you need to budget for. Trade show booth, as a matter of fact. But it looks like a close race between yes and no. So for those who have budgeted, kudos to you. You have thought ahead. For those who haven't, you're operating at a deficit, and at some point it's going to hold you back from really being able to market your product, because you haven't gone through a branding exercise like this, or developed a scalable and extendable brand to cover other products that you might be developing. So I think it's very important to note budgets are important, and it's often overlooked. So I appreciate the ones that have budgeted. So let's close this poll and to get to the next slide. So is there a concept behind your logo? Some people said that they have a logo. Fantastic. And it looks like those who do have a logo, maybe it was created by a graphic designer. Fantastic. So I'm going to share with you why it's important to have a concept behind your logo. go forward here. So I did 2 logos within the last 18 months. This is one of them for a startup, fintech startup company called Legacy Concierge. And it does have a concept. Using a compass as a metaphor that encapsulates this empathetic portrayal of people locking arms in support of the company's vision of financial guidance during the grief and loss of a loved one. So the whole idea of metaphor of a compass was important. But then this human aspect symbolized through the coming together and or protecting in a gesture, incorporating that into the icon was very important. And we eventually did get this logo trademark, so it became ownable because of the strange combination of things, because no one had that concept before, no one had that service before. So we were in a territory that was ownable and trademarkable, and that's important. And so this is an example of how once you get that icon, how can that icon help in designing a system of solutions for more product development, more services, and start to show ownership of the mothership brand of these other services and build in that recognition when people see Locket. Well, Legacy Concierge isn't in that name at all, but we've used the elements from the brand, the house fonts, the color, and the icon is replacing the O. So that was a clever way to say, hey, if you're going to develop any products, new names, make sure there's an O in it, because we can drop the icon in there to replace the O. And then all of a sudden, the logo type becomes this new logo because it incorporates the icon, which is trademarked, which makes the new name more easily trademarked because you've already used a trademarked icon in the name, in the logo type, in the word mark. Okay. So this is an example of a very limited palette, with just this blue and white. I think there's 2 blues, but primarily 1 blue. And it ends up being a very strong and recognizable brand and easily to extend with this whole idea of integrating the icon into whatever new naming convention. Now, I'm going to show samples from the style guide. I deliver a major style guide at the end of every project, and these are excerpts. So here we're just talking about the colors. I talked about 2 blues, and then the use of black, medium gray, and white, and this limiting of the palette makes for a stronger brand, because we're really focusing down on how the brand looks and behaves. In terms of house fonts, this one happens to be Avenir, one of my favorite fonts. It's a very contemporary sans serif font, but it's a family, so you can have bold and light and condensed versions, and that's used pervasively throughout any communication, and it helps hang the brand together. Now, I show these imagery montages because what happens is everyone's using stock photography these days. So anyone can use the same stock photo, you put it up on your website as a clean photo, and your competitor could use the same photo. So what can you do differently to express the brand, the sentiment, the emotion, and go beyond the photo? So I do these montages that support what I call a creative platform. What is a creative platform? We talked about a communications platform. That's just the words. A creative platform can take the logo and the identity, break it apart, reassemble it in a creative expression that becomes a backdrop for the brand. It could become the cover of a brochure. It can be the main panel on a website. It can be the cover of your folder for your sales kit. And it all ladders up to the brand, because guess what? The icon's repeated there a few times. This whole compass element is broken out from the icon and is used as a way to focus in on certain action within a photograph, or capture a certain emotion, or highlight certain picture in a clever way that's branded. These are all branded moments. And so the idea of a creative platform is very much a part of the corporate identity. And that can be reflected in how you do your social media and the use of photography. If I just use the single shots of this stock imagery, your competitor could use the same shots. So then who owns what? It just creates this wasteland of, a wasted photo. But if you can layer on and synthesize your brand into a look that has a creative platform that's immediately recognizable, it's like, oh yeah, that's a Legacy Concierge post because they use that cool compass thing to highlight the action. And then, as it relates to advertising, these are just sample ad layouts, but these become very distinctive. Yes, it's a stock photo, but again, the presentation, the layout, the whole gestalt of the whole ad feels branded, and that's how a creative platform can help. Otherwise, people just put up a stock photo and you have the logo at the bottom and they say, hey, we got the logo. What's wrong with that? It's like, well, anybody can use that stock photo. That's what's wrong with that. So what are you doing differently? Now let's go on to the website. So all this stuff also supports the website, because you can have montages and certainly curate photographs that support the brand. But again, in whatever expression, whatever touch point, we always want to be consistent and celebrate the brand wherever we can. Here's the second one. Digital Age came to me. They had a name that sounded 30 years old. How do you make it contemporary? So I came up with an icon that combined the D and A into one word, the D of digital and the A of age, because it needed to be one word, and created this symbol, a powerful icon that has 3 interlocking sections. And they symbolize technology, content, and community coming together in the form of a new social media platform. So we expanded the palette out to be a little more primary and bold and electric feeling, which is important. And it gave us a few more options, actually, when doing product development. And some of that product development is here. So using the house font, using these primary colors, playing with that icon, breaking it apart and making new words. You can see in the Ad Center logo, we use the A and the D. The A is just the D without the ascender, and created what is an ad icon that would appear on ads on the platform. So again, being clever with the shapes that were developed, that were given, and then celebrating that color palette in many different ways, so they can all ladder up to the brand, the mothership brand of Digital Age. Now, in terms of corporate identity, yes, I'm guilty. I love the Avenir font. I use it again for this brand. I did 10 other brands in the interim that didn't use this font, but it was so perfect for this because of the modern aspect. And then here we have the colors specced out, and at the early stages, we really didn't have a product to show, so we went with an illustrated look and had fun with it. And the primary colors, made some very great bold statements that were very colorful, that got noticed, and then got reflected in the website. And so that is really the end of my presentation. And I think what the last poll I have is, do you have a brand style guide? So if we can throw that poll up there, it'd be great to know where everyone's at with their style guides. The no's are leading. And some of you do, some of you have it, but some of you don't. Most of you don't. And even those who don't, they don't even have a logo, a JPEG of the logo. So that's a problem. So yeah, this is probably 55% polling. The no's have it. So hopefully I've shown in this presentation the importance of a style guide and how you can maintain a strong brand as you do further product development, create new logos, new marketing materials. Again, branding leads into marketing. If you don't have a strong brand, it's going to be difficult to do marketing that hangs together and looks consistent across all the various touch points, the various channels, all the social channels. And so you're kind of handcuffing yourself going into marketing without having a strong brand represented by a style guide, a brand guide that is also inclusive of the communication platform. How do you talk about the brand? How do you speak about the brand? But then how it's manifested visually through a creative platform, the corporate identity, the business card, the sign on the building. All these things are considerations. So when you have that strong brand to start, for those who have budgeted for that, kudos to you. You're going to have a better time in marketing than those who haven't. Because when you get to marketing, it'll be, well, what do our ads look like? If you hire an ad agency, the first thing they're going to ask for is, well, do you have a style guide? Or where's your logo? Or do you have a house font? Do you have the colors spec'd out? Because without those, if they don't ask for those, then you've picked the wrong ad agency. If they proceed without a brand style guide, then you're going to be working out branding as you're developing the marketing, which by the time you get to marketing, it's a little different message and very focused on certain constituents and creative that supports that. And that's a whole nother creative challenge. And you don't want to be bogged down by tackling branding issues that are canceling out or affecting what might be great advertising ideas, but because they don't have the right branding, it might, end up on the editing room floor because of this confusion, this brand confusion that happens once you get into marketing. So again, the smarter you are up front, it streamlines the process downstream and helps eliminate churn and kind of respects your ad agency or your marketing agency or your CMO or your internal marketers. You may have a brand manager who's tasked with, oh, I have to now market this on social in 3 days and I don't have a brand style guide. What do I do? You're not going to be able to hit the ground running at a time when you may need to hit the ground running. So I'd be happy to take any questions that might have come up. We have a few thought starters here, but hopefully there are some questions I can answer.
Thanks, Kurt, for that session. Please, if you have any questions to Kurt, please feel free to write them in the chat or in the Q&A and we'll take them up. In the meantime, Kurt, I see a question in your list of critical questions. Do you have a naming strategy for your products and sub-products? Could you explain more on this, please?
Yeah, so there's an opportunity in product development, product design, which, might fall under CTO's purvey. Like if it's a technical product or a mobile app, the CTO might be in charge of the product development, which, the evolution of user experience design, which is part of branding, should be part of that product development. So what you want to look for in branding is creating opportunities for clever naming that can be ownable once you get to creating sub-brands. Think about what Apple's done, and why they went with iPhone versus Apple phone. They eventually kind of own that naming convention, right? Because they flooded the market with all these products. So that was a naming strategy, and then they owned it and they could trademark it. So if you have a naming strategy that comes from the brand, let's say, in terms of what you saw with Digital Age, we ended up using the D to talk about D comics or D podcast. And again, you can't own the word podcast, but you could own the word D podcast because they're Digital Age podcasts. So, that's what makes product development fun, is leveraging the brand into your product naming. And it also creates a more ownable situation that can be trademarked. So both of those logos that I shared with you today were trademarked. And so they're registered. They get the Circle R. And that doesn't happen with every brand because the graphic designer, if they hired one, didn't do enough research, or they didn't hire a graphic designer, went with a college student who didn't know that they needed to research whether someone had a mark like that before they turned in their logo. So that's how naming and a naming strategy kind of dovetails and comes out of a branding exercise and creates opportunity. You can choose to ignore the opportunity, but again, how can you streamline this process and work towards ownable products and names that are more trademarkable, so you don't get challenged out there in the market with your product, whatever it may be.
Thanks, Kurt. We have a couple of questions in chat. So the first one would be, on average, how much does it cost to trademark your name, logo, etc.?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't pay for those legal costs for my clients. I recommend patent or legal trademark patent attorney. And those prices can be anywhere from as low as $600, but generally, if there's challenges, it can get up to $3,000, if not more. So it's a worthwhile investment to at least budget $3,000, and that goes to the lawyers who do all the due diligence. What they'll do an international search and come up with discovery. This happened with one of the name of my consultancies, Virtuoso, where I thought I was clever. It's like, oh, I'm going to spell virtuoso because I'm dealing with vertical content, and I spelt it Vertuoso, but actually that's the Spanish translation for of virtuoso, which is someone who's mastered their craft, whether they're a violinist or something. And so in South America, there was a travel travel agency that had the name Virtuoso because they used the Spanish spelling of it because they were a Latin American country. And they contested my trademark filing. They weren't in the same category, but it put and not an impasse, but it put a hurdle in the process. So, but that's the kind of things that will come up when you finally do hire a lawyer. They're going to do that due diligence globally. And that's important because you may not think you're going to be a global company, but even if you launch domestically, you can have challenges internationally, even though you may not be in those markets, that just start to muddy the waters and prevent you from owning the name of your company. So you do want to hire lawyers to help you with that.
All right. So the next one would be, When you're a startup, you have very limited funds. So the idea of having funds for branding seems far from reality for most. So the question is, what is a simple, impactful tactic to use so you can create some brand awareness?
Okay, let's talk about brand awareness, because what is a brand? Because we talked about all these things that a brand can and should be, and it is more than a logo. But the brand is really what is retained by a user, someone who comes in contact with your brand. They're going to remember something about it. They're going to either remember a great customer experience, like, well, that was easy, I'm going to come back and do that again. Or they're going to say, you know, I've been seeing these billboards with this logo, and I finally bumped upon a social media post. I clicked through the website, and it's a really cool service. I like it a lot. So what people remember about the brand, that is the effect, that is branding. Now you ask, what do you do in a pinch when you don't have any pennies to pinch to create a brand? I think it's important to take it upon yourselves to actually do a competitive search. Okay, how are you different than your competitors? And that's direct or indirect. And what you want to make sure, however you do it, however you can scrape it together, you need to be different than your competitors, and you need to try to be unique. Okay. And so that has to be the goal. So how do you do that on, very little or no budget? I think that's the question. So there are services. I don't like to recommend them, but a company like Fiverr, who is a source of many graphic designers, animators, editors, all coming together and saying, hey, hire me. I'm in Pakistan, I'm in Bangalore, whatever, but here's my affordable price to get you what you need for a logo. Do they do all the due diligence and all the research that I've just described? They may not. And you kind of start to get what you pay for. Sometimes it could be $100, $200, and they say, okay, I'll give you 3 rounds. And you get the 3 rounds, maybe. What if you don't like the logos that they do? So you just lost that money. Or you have to continue with them and they say, okay, well, that's a new project, so now I have to charge you another $100. It just becomes this churning process that I find not collaborative and doesn't lead to great results, because it doesn't have all that kind of front loaded research at the beginning to help a winning solution make it to the end. That again, the ultimate test is, can you trademark that logo? So I mean, those are the considerations that it's not ideal if you haven't budgeted. That's why I do these seminars, to evangelize. You need to set aside some money, in your angel round. If in your friends and family investing, they ask, well, what are you going to use the funds for? It's like, oh, it's all going to the technology to build the app. It's like, well, that's great. Well, what are you calling the app? Oh, I haven't thought about that. Okay, well, then what's the logo? Well, we don't have a name yet, right? So it's a cart before the horse, or the horse before the cart. And my job is to illuminate the need, highlight the pitfalls if you don't do it. But if you do it, and a major portion of the group here today has done it, they've allocated funds, their success rate is going to be greater moving forward, and it will be an easier job as you flow into marketing.
All right. So the next one will be, where is a good place to go if I want to start looking for a CMO? It seems these days there are a lot of freelance options.
Yes. So, founders, when they're looking for money, um, they're judged by the team that they've built. That's one of a critical factor for investors, whether they want to support a company. So, we talk about the C-suite a lot, the CEO, COO, CTO, CMO. Now, CMO is probably a lot less priority than the first three, but if you have someone, if you can get someone on your team, you may not have to pay them because you don't have any money to pay them, right? But they've agreed to be part of the team. Maybe they're part of the cap table or get some type of shares or ownership of the company, whatever. The stronger your C-suite, say that 10 times fast, the stronger your C-suite is when you're approaching investors, the more likely you're going to get money. Now, if there's no money coming in and you say, well, I'm a founder, I have a co-founder, I'm like, I'm a businessman, and then I have a CTO, and that's all we have right now. Well, that means, okay, maybe you don't fill out your C-suite and you go the next level down. You have president, you have vice president, you have director levels. So you can hire those people. They're a little more affordable because they're down the chain, right? You may not have to give them part of the cap table or shares in your company, but they could help with the tasks that need to be done during this phase. This phase meaning starting your company, brand creation, product development. And so it helps if you have someone like that on the team that can help guide someone else that you may hire when you hire an agency or a consultant like myself. It gives a point of contact and some organization and some focus on these things internally. Now, I think the question was, how do you find a CMO? So my response was, yes, CMOs are hard to find. They're expensive, sorry. And you may not need them. So then you can look for going down the food chain in terms of getting a director of marketing, let's say. And that all of a sudden becomes more affordable. And there's many out there that were just laid off by all the tech companies. So you can expand your search beyond the C-suite. Otherwise, do work through recruiters because they're going to know who's available and who's right. So I think agencies that recruit executives, and executives don't have to be always C-suite. They could be presidents and vice presidents. Recruiters will have their stable of people that they know are available and might be perfect for your company.
All right. And then we have time for our last question. So someone in this chat says, if you can share your vision so people can understand it better, how can you create a community that cultivates clients' interests? Assuming hard to answer.
Okay, yeah. So I mentioned in developing the core truths, I talked about interviewing different constituents. So I always ask, it's like, hey, do you have some clients that I could talk to, some key clients or key clients that know of the service you're about to launch and are interested? Maybe they're investors, but they could also be clients. So I encourage talking to clients to understand what they're looking for, because ultimately they're going to be a persona in your marketing plan targeting, well, we need to talk to heads of marketing at certain types of companies because they need to buy our product, or a head of sales. So yeah, I encourage to extend that SWOT analysis with potential clients or customers.
All right. And it's time to wrap. Kurt, thank you so much for that insightful presentation for sure. And thank you everybody for joining us today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. And with that, like I said, I would really like to thank our mentor, Kurt, and guests for joining us today. And we will be back soon with more workshops. Also, part of workshop, we have upcoming events, as you can see on your screen. You can check out our Kiwi Tech website for the same. Do join us, and we would love to host you on those events as well. Thank you and have a great day ahead.
Thank you.